and it always shows up at some point. And I'm live. Hello, everyone, and what the hell is up with just academia? But also, we're going to be talking about anarchy in academia. So, what the hell's up with anarchy? And usually I start out with what the hell's up with whatever to set the tone. This is Ask Me, I'm a Scientist, where I bring on a different expert every week. We talk about their topic of interest. You can ask your own questions here or on social media in advance. But I like to start out with what the hell is up with blank, just to kind of set the tone that this is unscripted, unedited, and probably unprofessional. But today, what the hell is up with academia is definitely a mood. We've got the amazing Dan Cleather on with us today. And so Dan is actually an associate professor of strength and conditioning at St. Mary's University, which I'm not even going to try to say the place in which that is, but also teaches statistics and research methods. But the reason that I really wanted us to talk with Dan today is that he published this awesome book, or wrote this awesome book called Subvert, sent it to me, and totally honest here, I read Anarchy in Academia, and I was like, that doesn't sound fun. I don't really want to read this, but I guess I'll look at it. And within a few pages, I was mad, not at Dan, but at the entire system. And so, of course, I had to keep reading this. Hopefully, all of you can be mad with me, or at least understand why I'm mad. But Dan seems awesome. Let's jump over to him. Hey, Dan, thanks for coming in.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Sorry for that lengthy introduction, but I am excited. Okay, so let's start out first, just really quickly. What is your actual job? Like, what do you do in your daytime?
Yeah, so I used to be a strength coach. So I used to coach elite athletes, and now my job is to help other people get better at doing that. So I run this online masters in strength and conditioning. So yeah, my job is to kind of keep that course going and talk to students and things.
That's awesome. And with statistics, we could talk about statistics. I don't love statistics. Maybe we'll have you back on to talk about statistics, and you can teach me things. But I just want to jump into this so fast because we had some amazing questions. Your book is called Subvert, and the tagline is a philosophical guide for the 21st century scientist. To be totally honest, I had no idea what anarchy even meant before looking at your book. So would you describe anarchy a little bit for us? Just like what does that mean? I always just I see the A sign and it looks scary. That's all I know. It's like, this is scary.
Yeah, so I don't think I knew what anarchism meant when I started this project, but because I started this project as a philosophy of science, but kind of as I read the philosophers of science who really kind of connected with me were all these anarchist philosophers. So I was kind of like, well, I seem to be liking this anarchism stuff, so I should probably read a bit of that. So I think it's really, really normal for people to not know what anarchism is, or to have a scary impression of what anarchism is, because kind of if we think of that, we think about anarchy and people running down the streets, smashing windows and things. And in the sense of kind of philosophical anarchism, that's not what it's about. So the way I like to look at it is, okay, you've got socialism, and socialism is this idea that it might be nice if we share everything equally amongst ourselves and the other people who live on this planet. And then you have two sides of the coin. So you're like, well, how are we going to do that? Mm-hmm. And communism says, okay, well, the state's going to organize that. And anarchists say, no. No one should be in charge. I think, if we just chat, we can work this out amongst ourselves. So that's kind of what anarchism is. It's, people cooperating locally with their neighbors to try and, share things and get by.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. But I really like how you just described that. And honestly, when I hear the word anarchy, I always just hear it in screaming sound. And it was really cool to read through this and start to understand what you actually meant by anarchy in academia. And so, just briefly, I know you just wrote an entire book about it, and I do want to tell people, like, you didn't pay me to do this. I just really wanted an excuse to ask you all of these questions. But you start out this book with, like, what does anarchism have to do with science anyway? And so relating it back to what you just said about this idea of shared goods and shared benefit, how does that relate to science? And I guess, like, how is that sort of breaking down right now?
Yeah, so like so sort of the, like, for want of a better word, analytical approach I took in the book is to kind of, you know, turn the tools of anarchism on science itself. So science is a community and a society. So let's look at science, the scientific community, you know, through the lens of an anarchist. But kind of, yeah, the scientific ideals kind of, I think, a thing, you know, or many of them are things that, yeah, like anarchists might approve of. So that, you know, there's not meant to be authority, you know, just due to your status alone in science. It's meant to be about, okay, you know, it's just about the quality of ideas and it's not about who you are. Similarly, that kind of knowledge is meant to be everyone's property. So it's kind of like ideas like this, you know, those seem like those seem to be ideals that I think most scientists will subscribe to, and that are consistent with an anarchist philosophy. But then if you actually kind of, you know, scratch the surface of the scientific community, then that's really not how it functions.
Yeah, I think based on talking with people, it's a pretty widespread disillusionment when you start to understand what really drives the wheels of research and academic research specifically. And I like that you brought up that point of that scientists generally ascribe to those ideas, that it's shared knowledge, that nobody is in charge just because of their status. It's about the community coming together and deciding if something is valid or not. And that's what I think scientists often sell as their way of life. But your book came out with so many ways in which this is just not the reality. Before I jump into that, why did you write this book? This is not exercise science, unless I'm missing like a whole chapter.
Yeah, no, so like you said in your intro, I teach research methods, and so I've kind of been like interested in the philosophy of science for some time, and then, you know, I just kind of got to a place where I thought, well, it would be cool to write something about this, and I didn't really know, I felt like I had something to say, but I didn't know what it was, and so I just started, you know, reading stuff and thinking, and until I worked out what it was that I wanted to say. Like, it's just a project to keep me interested, you know.
Yeah, I certainly understand that. I want to ask, while you were writing this, were you ever emotional or like angry? Because reading it, oh my, like, I think it was like the second chapter where you really get into it and you really start to see some of the injustices that have been done in academia, against women, minorities, just even people who didn't have the money, weren't in the right class, and how all of that has defined what science we have. I took to reading these chapters before bed, and I had to read something else afterwards because I was so just you just gave me examples of the things that that aren't really tangible, but you can kind of see remnants of throughout academia. So what was the process of writing this like?
I don't know, like, I mean, one of the things that I had in my mind that that when you read the sort of, you know, the anarchist literature from like the end of the 18th century, oh sorry, the end of the 19th century, so like late 1800s, some of it's hard, but some of it is like, it's so passionate. The writing, like they you know, they really kind of hold forth on, with on everything that's wrong with the world. And so it makes me happy that you think that, or that some sort of anger comes across in it, because I was trying to keep that tone, like sort of have a, the same style of writing.
Yeah.
But yeah, like science, the where we're at with science does, make a lot of scientists angry, I think. So it's pretty easy to draw on that, I think.
Yeah. So one of the things that you come back to a lot, I'm looking at my book notes now, you come back to someone named Merton, and talking about a lot about his ideals. How does that relate to research and publishing and things like that?
Yeah, so this guy Merton, who's a very big figure, in the sociology of science. He kind of coined these, four ideals of what a scientific society would look like. That was kind of what we were talking about before. That you have kind of the people, that ideas are judged on their own quality. That there's that information is available to everyone, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're really nice ideals, and but they're just not the reality. So if you take kind of, an ideal of science is that there's, or one of Merton's ideals of science is that there's communism of information. That is that everyone can get access to information, which we know is just ludicrously not the case. We have paywalls all over the place. Those of us who work for universities in the West are actually probably in the best position to kind of get hold of research, but we can't either. If you're in a developing country, then your ability to access, information is just tiny. So it's nonsense to suggest that the current scientific community has communism of information.
Well, and it's, I think when I first got this book, I was working on finishing up defending, and now I'm on the other side of it. I'm getting kicked off of the university servers and things like that. And I mean, we get upset about people for not communicating science correctly, but I can't access the papers anymore. How can I be correct? I have to go illegally through, and you talk about this actually in your book, is how people go past these paywalls, and how that is this start of explaining how anarchy can benefit science. And if it didn't have to be in this weird sketchy background way, you had an entire chapter 5 was all about scientific publishing. I don't know. I'm just going to try to make people mad now. What is wrong with scientific publishing? You don't have to tell us everything that's wrong, but what do you think is wrong?
So, I mean, I've talked about kind of open science issues, and so those are well discussed, and people know. Like, for me as a scientist, the thing that I find most frustrating with academic publishing is that if you try and do anything that doesn't fit the mold, it's impossible to get it out there. So the structure of the whole publishing enterprise and the way that peer review is structured is such that, if you do something that just follows the thread of what's gone before, that you kind of shepherd things into publication. But if you try to do anything that's slightly out of the norm, you're going to have a really, really hard time getting it into print. And I just think that's not what science is meant to be about. Science is meant to be a creative and exciting enterprise, whereas kind of the whole peer review process turns everyone into kind of automatons, who just have to spend hours and hours kind of doing things the way that they're supposed to be done, because that's the way they're supposed to be done.
I mean, I think that if we were to look at academic research and the foundation for it, and I always say this, but if we were to write a grant to fund academic research in general, we just wrote a grant and we had the methods, the aims, the everything we wanted, the hypothesis that we could work together and find new information and support new learners, which is kind of what we plan to do. If we put the methods that we currently use out there, there is no way any funding agency would fund us. You know, if scientists took a close look at how it works, the best reason I've gotten from people of why we have this system is that we already have this system. That's the best answer I've heard.
Yeah, and the system is so wasteful of resource, because if you take something like peer review, you just burn hours and hours on pointless busy work. It's crazy. And I think kind of if you then come back to kind of, okay, well, why do we have this system? You then have to, and if you're looking at it from the perspective of an anarchist, well, we have this system for historical reasons. Mm-hmm. And the historical reasons are that, well, science was an enterprise that was done by wealthy white men as a hobby, that they liked, going and chatting with their mates about it. And that's where peer review first came from. So kind of, we have to kind of understand that the system we have is constructed from a very impoverished background, and that kind of just doing things because that's the way they've been done, especially when it has all of that historical baggage with it, is probably not the most efficient way for a 21st century model of science to work.
Yes. This is the part where I'm going to tell people, like, if you have children listening, I mean, you already know that there's going to be swearing, but I had this one page marked, and we talked about this right before we hopped on, that there was one section, I was looking through my notes beforehand, and I was like, oh, this note just says, what the fuck? So that must be an interesting note. I should probably look into that. And so this section was about looking at how we sort of decide that scientists are good or bad, or we say, well, they're a good scientist, and so they clearly, we can kind of ignore these different things that they've already done. So would you tell us a little bit about this example that I'm referencing that is like my favorite? I don't know. This was the moment where this was where I was angry.
Is this the war thing?
Yes, this is the war thing.
Yeah, no, like the. Yeah, so there's a book that I reference in that section called Hitler's Scientists. I think it's by a guy called John Cornwell, and it's a fantastic book. Like it's a really, really great book. I highly recommend it, for all. And it kind of traces, scientific activity through the First and the Second World War, and it's just crazy the amount of shitty things that scientists were doing. On both sides, like it's common for people to kind of blame the other side, but it was the Allies and the Nazis were kind of doing horrible things. But the example that you gave was when we were talking before was that there were the Germans set up in the First World War these kind of chemical testing, chemical warfare group. With some very, very eminent scientists in it, and at least 4 of them went on to win Nobel Prizes. Similarly, the one that I always find shocking is that the Nazis had where the Nazis were advanced ahead of the Allies was in terms of rocket technology, and they were kind of building rockets underneath this mountain in Germany using slave labor, and thousands of people were dying to run these scientists' research programs. And the guy who was in charge of this, Werner von Braun, after the war, despite the fact that he kind of oversaw the deaths of all these people and was a member of the SS, was kind of quietly shepherded to the States and worked for NASA for years, to help them put a man on the moon, with no consequence at all for what he was involved in, which is just fucking nuts.
It is. I mean, that's, I like rage read my way through chapter 2. And the stuff about, I think that really goes to the heart of the matter, and to bring us back to the point too of like, why does academia need anarchy? And I think it's, and why does research need anarchy? And I think that we already pretend that it has it. We already say, we judge you based on your science. We judge you based on the likelihood that you're going to find something new, create something new, whatever. But it's this really perpetuating cycle of the rich getting richer and so many stacked things against people. And, a younger PI who doesn't have the accolades behind her name is definitely less likely to get funded than somebody who is older, has the name recognition, has already gotten funded a bunch of times, even if they sent in exactly the same grant.
Yeah.
And then thinking about these atrocities that are committed, I personally, when people get to the point where they say, well, there's good science and then there's good people, sometimes they're not the same. And so why should we throw out science because it was done by somebody who does horrible things? And I think that if you make these really awful moral judgments of using slave labor or sexually assaulting one of your students or, lying on a bunch of other papers, why would I believe any science that you did? It might turn out to be true, but it might not. You've already proven your moral failings about what you are willing to do to get that publication.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, so kind of what you're talking about there is, okay, well, are we going to pardon these crimes that this person has committed so we can get their data, which clearly the Allies did after the Second World War. But you kind of, I come across this a much, much less severe example all the time, which is kind of where students have, or the students that I work with are students who are often working with sports teams and things like that. So they collect data on their team's performance as part of their jobs. And often they want to, when they come to do their dissertation, they just want to use that data to answer a question. And it's always really, really hard to kind of explain why that's ethically dodgy. You've collected that data without having gone through an ethical scrutiny process. And so we can't just go like, even in the case where, we know that you were going to collect that data anyway, and probably there's, it's a bunch of football players' heart rates, like who cares? But despite that it's not that simple, and that kind of, personally, I don't ever like it when you get to a position where people, you're allowing people to use kind of data that's been, or it's unfair to say I don't ever like it, but I'm always very uncomfortable using data that's been collected prior to it having been underneath the scrutiny of an IRB or similar.
Yeah, and also you're a statistician, and one of the few things I know about stats is that if you have a data set and you're looking for something, you're always going to find something with stats.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't like to be branded as a statistician, but but I'll take it.
You're like, please call me an anarchist, not a statistician. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. That is fair.
Yeah, yeah, sorry.
No,
carry on.
That's fine. That's completely fine. So I want to get to some viewer questions. One that I think is really interesting and leads into kind of the second part of your book, which now that you've gotten everyone riled up, you do actually offer some changes that could be made. You offer what it might look like, and that's really why I liked it a lot is that it wasn't something where I ended up closing the book, walking away, and just feeling like this is horrible. There's actually quite a lot of hope in your book. One of the questions is from Jay. They ask, academia is largely hierarchical, tenure versus non-tenure, to name one. What would a horizontal hierarchy look like in academia? Or what would it look like if we actually had a spread of power?
Yeah, so I saw this question on Twitter and was dreading it.
Oh, good.
Look, because I don't, so like not because I don't have an answer, but because I have an answer that people will find unsatisfactory, and it's the answer is kind of, or this is the area where anarchism as a philosophy always gets kind of most criticized, because the anarchist response to that question is, I don't know, like we're going to negotiate it as we go. What we know is that we'll organize and we'll find a way of organizing that kind of meets all of our needs in the best way that we can. And so to kind of, the criticism of anarchism is always like, well, where's your roadmap? And the answer is always, well, it's not anarchism if you have a roadmap. It's this idea that the revolution is never ending, like that we just kind of, well, we're in a shitty place now, so let's make changes that make it a less shitty place.
I love this so much.
And then we just, like, not knowing where we're going is not a reason not to take a step. So let's do things that can make it better, and let's keep trying to do things that make it better. So I don't know what the end would look like, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't be optimistic that we could get to a place where people are treated better.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I think it really goes back to the point about science, because if you throw out this big word of anarchy and all of the things, the feelings that come along with it, and like communism, you have to tread around these words, but if you get back to the point of them, the idea of anarchy being non-predetermined, that you make the decisions based on new input, that you have an idea or an educated guess, or I guess we could call it a hypothesis of how things might work based on previous situations, and you're looking for an answer that is better than you currently have. I mean, that sounds kind of like science, right?
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting that it is I guess that people are debating it. I think it makes sense, because I didn't know much about it, but it totally makes sense. And actually, Phonetical has a question of asking, were you worried when you wrote this book that people were going to be questioning you as a professor, as someone who's in academia? Were you ever worried about putting this out there and just sort of gently pointing out all that is wrong and that all that could be done?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm in a different environment to kind of, or I know in the US, kind of like saying socialism draws a lot more ire than it does in the UK. So kind of I'm in a more friendly environment generally to kind of talk about these issues than I would be if I was at a US university. But yeah, like I sorry, I'm going to have my cat
Yes.
Going across the screen.
Anarchy.
I knew that.
No one's in charge of this video.
It was inevitable there was either going to be a child, or this was going to be interrupted by a child or a cat. So, but yeah, I think that. I just I think that as an academic, like if you can't express your opinion, as an academic, then it's pretty sad. So yeah, I had anxiety kind of broaching these issues, but kind of tried to put that thought in the back of my head and just go for it.
Yeah. Well, I'll be your head cheerleader, because this is awesome. So let's see. There's a lot of great questions. But I do have a good question coming in from, there's so many ways to say this. Wildy Bilson. we'll go with it. Asking some analysis of academia post-COVID shows a sort of disaster capitalism occurring to make academia more unequal. Are you concerned about this, or are you hopeful about like better, more anarchistic changes?
Yeah, I do think. Yeah, I am worried about what's happening in academia. I think that kind of. I deliver an online program. Okay, so I'm comfortable with online teaching, but kind of, I do think that kind of that there's a potential for this to set a precedent and to be the thin end of the wedge to kind of driving further along the path that we've been towards kind of, a capitalization and a marketization of academia. So 100%, I don't think, I don't, cat again.
This is
Sorry.
Oh, don't be.
I don't think, yeah, I don't. When COVID first started, I was kind of optimistic for society generally, in terms of kind of like, okay, well, like, don't get this wrong way. I'm not saying it's a positive thing, but that, okay, something terrible has happened. Is that going to be the spur for people to realize that actually, if we keep going the way that we are going, in terms of academia, but more widely, and in terms of the environment and things, that actually, what, shit can happen, and that the fact that we've experienced that might be a stimulus for change. But as time has gone by in this crisis, I've not been very optimistic that is, and I kind of feel now pretty worried that we're just going to come out the other end in a worse position than we were. But
yeah, I feel similarly. I think that it's an opportunity, and to go back to what you said about like we're in a shit position, so let's try something, and if it gets worse, let's change, and if it gets better, let's keep on that path and see what else we could do better. And so I think that it was a good opportunity, and maybe still is a good opportunity to take a look at, okay, this system is working well enough. Well, it's absolutely not working now. It's not working to do anything. It's not taking in money. Yeah. It's not teaching people. It's not supporting people's mental health or development. Okay, it's super broken. Now what? And for some reason, I'm very concerned that this is going to be a lost opportunity. And it's part of the other reason I was very excited to talk with you. People are all over the chat. I have one from Matthew DeForest, and he follows up this question with, on his question, it sounds more aggressive than it meant to be, but at the risk of sounding reductive, how would you determine whose lab experiment is run in an academic scientific department? An ongoing series of committee meetings doesn't sound ideal either. So kind of, how can you have any sort of structure or leadership? Is that totally out in Anarchy?
Yeah, so kind of, again, it's a misconception about what anarchism is to say that there's not organization. It's just that it's organization from the bottom up, not from the top down. But kind of, I do think that it's an interesting question of, okay, well, if there's a certain amount of funding to do studies, like who's going to get what, and there are questions. So there's a section in the book where there's the kind of the effectiveness of the kind of grant evaluation process, as we know, is pretty poor, and there's some literature that's shown that kind of like it in some respects it's almost random. Like I have a personal example which kind of I had in the book, but then I took out because I thought it was getting too much. It sounded too bitter. But I made a grant application where, so you're evaluated essentially on a scale from 1 to 6. And I had like a 6, a 5, a 4, a 3, and a 2. And you're kind of like, well, I had the full, gamut of evaluations on this thing, from someone saying, wow, this is the best thing I've ever seen, to someone else saying this is dog shit. So it's pretty random. And but I kind of like, there are, I mean, they're extreme, but examples of, okay, well, how could funding be, awarded? And the two that I like that I talk about in the book, one is, okay, by lottery. So yeah, you have a bar which says, okay, if you get above this, level of scientific worth, whatever it is, everything goes into a lottery, and that sounds crazy, but it's really effectively no different to what happens now.
Yeah, and you save a ton of time. I mean, the amount of
Yeah.
time that people spend reviewing all of these things. I think there have actually been, someone's calculated before that shows like we lose more money by having all of these people rate the grants, travel, do these study groups, things like that, than is actually given out if you tally up the
Yeah.
amount of money per hour per person in it. And again, it's just,
Yeah.
if anyone came in as a scientist and evaluated that program, there's no way you can justify it other than just it already exists and nobody feels the need to change it.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then the other alternative that I quite, or seems kind of pretty, consistent with an anarchist philosophy to me, is that you just split the grant money amongst everyone evenly, and that means that no one has a super large pot, and it might sound like that means, okay, well, you can't do big experiments, but I don't think it means that. It just means that, okay, if you want to do a big experiment, you need to cooperate with a bunch of other people to do it, and actually, because there's not one person in charge of that project, because it's a cooperation, the anarchist perspective would be that it would be better. Other people might disagree, but.
Well, and I think that's where academia needs to take a hard look at itself and say, what really are our values? Is this about supporting scientists and supporting science? Is this about finding the best answers in a way that's the least likely to get misconstrued and to do what we say we're doing? Or is this aligning with the status quo? Is this producing papers as fast as humanly possible, whether or not they're accurate, whether or not they're equitable in terms of who can access them, who can even write them and have a chance of getting published? I just, there's so many things. I think we could talk about this for an hour, and I think the points that we didn't really get too much is how it could be better. But there are a lot of ways that you talk about that this could be better. There are, like we said, there's, we have a good opening right here. One of my takeaways was sort of, there does need to be this huge structural change, but the truth is, like, everyone is part of this structure. What can people at the lower levels do? Are there things that we can do to feel a little empowered about this situation?
I mean, I think so. So kind of, I mean, I think it's difficult at the lower levels because, there's a big, I mean, there's lots of pressures to maintain the status quo. But, for instance, if you want to get tenure from a US perspective, or just get promoted from a UK perspective, then yeah, like where we are currently is that you're going to get assessed on this or that metric. But if you're kind of, if there are, so as an example of what, to answer your question, as an example of what we can do is, there's no barriers now to anyone setting up their own journal, for instance. And you can set up your own journal and have whatever editorial policy you want. There's open source solutions in order to do that. It's relatively easy. It just requires an investment of time. But academics give away their time all the time anyway, in terms of doing peer review. But yeah, like the only reason why people don't set up their own journals and don't submit to these smaller journals is that the existing journals have prestige. If you're prepared to kind of, eschew a little bit of prestige, then then that's something really positive. I think that we could do to start, breaking down the monolith that is academic science.
Yeah, just when you have a choice to make, if you can make a choice that promotes the culture, the ideals that you want, I think it's just, if everyone did that, I think it would change very quickly. We're seeing, obviously, in the time of COVID, that that's not necessarily the case, but I hope that scientists in general do have the ability and the opportunity to question themselves, and ask, really, what do they want to get out of this experience? I always end these with asking, what are you interested about in this specific topic? Like, what are you reading about? What are you still excited about learning? Anarchy, academia, however, your cat's tail. People really liked that, by the way. The chat enjoyed that.
I'm glad. I get it. Yeah. I thought I was actually expecting it to be one of my sons coming over and saying what's going on, but so yeah, I've got, I'm still really, really into this area, and I'm still doing a lot of reading in this area and thinking. I guess two projects that I want to do that are in very, very early stages. One is so this book was inspired by this tweet from the Twitter account Shit Academics Say.
Yeah, you literally have like a page of their tweets.
Anyway, I enjoyed that account. But yeah, the quote was, if research is subversive, and teaching is protest, then learning is hope. And so kind of a lot of what I was trying to do in this book was trying to think about, well, what does it mean to say research is subversive? And so kind of the next thing that I kind of want to think about and turn into a project was, okay, well, what does it mean that if teaching is protest? So with a friend, we're kind of in the very early stages of thinking about what a project might look like that tries to answer that question, again, coming at it from an anarchist perspective. And then I guess the other thing that I'm interested in, which is a really, really slow science project, and that I won't do anything on. I've promised myself that I'm not going to write anything on it for 10 years, is just thinking about, the philosophy of statistics.
Oh my God.
Because, but again, in the book, it's kind of like, so, the statistical tools that we use at the moment were developed by racists, and the maths is the maths, but the connection to the world is philosophical, and I feel like that means something, and that there should be some sort of alternative, but. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Like,
that's a hell of a cliffhanger. You're like, I'm like, oh, I'm mad again. You're like 10 years. So I guess I'll put that on my calendar.
I've never done that before, though. Like, it's, part of the thing with this book was like, okay, well, if you're going to write something like this and publish it, then you need to start practicing what you preach. So kind of I am, trying to live by some of the things that I say in this book, but I'm in a position where kind of I'm a little bit further on through my career, so it's easier for me to do that than someone at an earlier stage in their career.
Fair. I don't know. You find people at every single level who say they can't possibly go against the system. So I really appreciate you wanting to do that, you writing about it. We have a question from Class War 420. It says, is there any non-Amazon or Barnes & Noble way to get this book? Is there any way that people can get this book?
Yeah, but you can't get the book at all at the moment, because I was planning to launch it last week, but because of the COVID thing, there's no copies. There's no physical copies available at all at the moment, because I don't feel right kind of people walking around warehouses and putting them in boxes and putting themselves at risk. So post lockdown, I'll release it. It partially, because it's self-published, it depends what stores pick it up. But I will look into that. At the moment, it's just available on Kindle. So
that's nice, though.
I hope. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Kindle, and the thing is too, you can get Kindle for your computer. So, and then it's not bad. Oh, and it saves trees. But oh my gosh, I love you're so like living what you're talking about. That's so cool. Yeah, that was the best answer that could ever happen. Other than yes, I have a million books and they are all here.
Yeah, and I've got no idea how to get them anywhere else. So,
That's awesome. Yeah, Class War 420 says bless. That was a very happy answer. So, all right, well, Dan, we have your contact information below. Are you comfortable with people reaching out to you on Twitter?
of course, yeah.
Maybe following you to see when the physical books get released again. Follow you for 10 years to find the stats one. Uh, yeah, so that's cool with you?
Yeah, no, that's great.
Uh,
Thank you so much for having me
Oh,
on.
I had a great time. This was awesome, and
Me
it's
too.
pretty. I think this is the first time I've ever talked directly to somebody who wrote a book I read, so that's really cool. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, everyone. That was awesome. I don't know about you, but that's been the most fun I've had about an angry topic in a very long time. Uh, like Dan was saying, he does not have the book in physical form for shipping right now because of the COVID situation, not wanting people to be in warehouses, which is very respectful, and that this is available on Kindle. He's super nice, and I think that that comes out in the book. The book is, I think it's useful because it has so many instances of the things that we see on a day to day basis. Again, this is not an advertisement for the book. I just really liked it. So, anyway, if you think there's other people I should talk to, other topics, other books I should read, I've seen some in the comments here. Please let me know. Also, just a quick reminder: please like, subscribe. I would love if you shared this video if you think it's interesting, if you think others might like it. Just because I want to know that I should keep doing this. I want to find new people to talk with, and hopefully all of you are enjoying it. If not, also let me know. Until then, have fun. Bye.